Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and of course, continuing on reviewing movies starring Harrison Ford. Now, we've come up to this film that definitely it's amazing. It's a masterpiece, and for this being based off of a TV show from the 1960s, and fun fact, this being the only film based off of a TV show to be nominated for Best Picture. That being The Fugitive. Yes, The Fugitive. Oh boy, because, this movie is fantastic. It's a masterpiece. Me and my parents, we love this film. So I'll go ahead and read the description / the story. Wrongfully accused of murdering his wife, Richard Kimball, played by Harrison Ford, escapes from the law in attempt to find her killer and clear his name. Pursuing him is a team of U.S. Marshals, led by Deputy Samuel Gerard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, a determined detective who will not rest until Richard is captured. As Richard leads the team through a series of intricate chases, I think I got that word right, he discovers the secrets behind his wife's death and struggles to expose the killer before it is too late. So the way that this movie opens, well, we already come to, the murder of Dr. Richard Kimball's wife, Helen Kimball, played by Celia Ward. Yeah. And, but we also get some flashbacks during this film. We get a bit like some flashback scenes, before the murder happened, because, they were at this party and, basically, Helen Kimball, she's very popular, and Dr. Richard Kimball, he's a well-respected doctor and surgeon, and, some friends that they have, and with those flashbacks, because, Richard Kimball being taken in and questioned, and it's they think that it was him that murdered his own wife. Why? Why do they think that he murdered his own wife? Because, money. He was after her money. But obviously that's not true. I mean, obviously, both Richard and Helen, they make good money, so, money doesn't matter. That's a fact. So, and even, Richard, he's explaining to them that, he's saying, you think that I murdered my own wife, There was a man in my house. He had a mechanical arm, as he says. And one of my favorite lines from Harrison Ford as Dr. Richard Kimball, pointing at them and saying, you find this man. And he hits the table and, he's going through a lot of emotions, as I just demonstrated, and being taken into court, and he's found guilty, and execution, basically, is upon him. And may God have mercy on his soul, as the judge says. And, when he's being taken to prison, he's on a bus with other prisoners, and basically what happens is one of the prisoners being transported, I think it was obvious, he was pretending to have, a seizure or something, foam in his mouth, and he went for, stabbing one of the deputies, the police officers on the bus, and at one point, they crash, and they're basically on train tracks, and one of the deputies is injured, and the one main police officer on the bus is asking Richard, to help him, and, uncuff me, stuff like that, and, even, right before he's about to save him, an incoming train approaches, and, some of the prisoners, including the one officer that, is alive and okay, they basically ditch the bus. Seriously? Not even the police officer is going to help, the deputy. And, gosh, but of course, Richard, he helps him and manages to get him out of the bus, and thankfully, so does he, as the train hits the bus. I gotta say, the train hitting the bus, like, that was definitely a highlight for this film. I mean, that was real, and that was done in one take, because even the director established that, there were no rehearsals, and there was no way that they could do a second take. This was their one chance that they could do this scene. And it turned out to be a fantastic shot. It's one of those where, you know what? One take, and it turns out perfect, And by the way, because that location with the crashed train and the bus, actually it resides at the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. There have been plenty of videos on YouTube, they explore the location of, the filming locations of The Fugitive with the train crashing into the bus. It's pretty cool. It's nice that it still resides there, and I don't know, from what I can tell, I think it's still in good condition. I mean, even though, nature's taken upon them, but still, nothing too bad to them. In fact, a lot of videos that have came out a while back of that location. But anyways, and then, of course, Samuel Gerard steps in, and I gotta tell you, Samuel Gerard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, as I said, he was another highlight of this film. And of course, we all know the sequel, U.S. Marshals, that follows up to this film. They did that sequel for that character because Tommy Lee Jones was fantastic in that. And I think, if I remember correctly, this movie won him an Oscar. Yeah, because this movie won a couple of Oscars. And as I said, it was nominated for Best Picture. So Samuel Gerard, he's just this, crazy, officer and, the leader of the U.S. Marshals, taking charge and tracking down and, hunting down Dr. Richard, that is, Dr. Richard Kimball. And, and as I said, throughout this film, they're chasing after Richard and, from time to time, Richard trying to blend in with, civilization. Even, say, he had to shave his beard and he had to, I think he, dyed his hair. Yeah. And by the way, fun fact, with Harrison Ford having a beard in this film, part of his character, actually, while he was filming The Fugitive, he also filmed his scenes for an episode of The Young Indiana Jones Adventures, and thus, Indiana Jones, in that episode, he has a beard. So that's pretty cool. I had to mention it because it's true. So as I said, he shaves off his beard, he at one point hides in a hospital. He needs to have something to eat. He eats a patient's food, basically, and trimming his hair a little bit. And as I said, shaving his beard. And the many times that, he's discovered. But sometimes, I guess, he blends in very well with the crowd. And some of the other characters in this film, part of the U.S. Marshals, there's Cosmo Renfro, played by Joe Pantoliano. I hope I got the last name right. And then there's also Poole with an E at the end. She was played by L. Scott Caldwell. And even say at times Cosmo and Samuel bickering, and even another highlight from this film where they're chasing after Dr. Richard Kimball near a dam and going into the sewer part of the dam, and Samuel is on his tail. Even at one point, Samuel dropped his gun. Richard got a hold of the gun. Gun points at him, and, he's confronting Samuel, telling him, "I didn't kill my wife." And, Samuel, with his hands up, and he says, "I don't care." And golly, that's the thing. Couldn't they have at least, they just, again, they assume that he killed his wife, but you know what? Even after what Richard said, that it wasn't him, it was somebody else. And the fact that during the court session, they were playing the phone recording, of Helen calling 911. And, you think that she was saying on the phone that it was Richard that was doing this. Obviously not. Yeah, and then, again, like Samuel, like he says that he doesn't care, and like, golly, like, at least, like try and know and figure out if it wasn't him. You get my point. And, us audience, we obviously know that it's not Richard that killed his wife. You know, Richard runs away, and then, of course, Samuel, he has a backup gun, and he has him gunpoint right at the edge of, where a drop is, at the dam. And obviously, Richard has no choice, but he jumps, and golly, just that shot of Richard falling into the water, and, he managed to survive that. And a pretty good line, because when Cosmo steps in, and, like, he's like, what the hell happened? And, Samuel's like, he did a Peter Pan fall right here off of this dam. Like, that was a good line. So, and even like Samuel calls in, like he's telling them that to tell them to turn off the water, and, so they can locate Richard, but obviously they cannot find him. Of course, he swam away, and, again, going through different buildings, and even coming back to his, like, hometown, the city, I think in Chicago? Yeah. And also, one of the prisoners that was on the bus, a black guy, like, because, he helped out Richard, like, uncuffing him, like, the cuffs on his legs, and, he told Richard not to follow him, go his own way, and Richard telling him, be good, and you think he would listen. I mean, he was hiding, but we see that the U.S. Marshals, they find his location. He's been hiding with this girl, and, her screaming, and he has one of the U.S. Marshal deputies held hostage, gun to his head, and of course, should have seen it coming, Samuel kills him, and even the lady was still screaming, and it was pretty funny, because, Samuel just calmly said, shut up. And she does, and gosh, even like the one deputy who was being held hostage, like, his ear was kind of deaf, like, not really, but like ringing, that kind of thing. And, Richard, like, not Richard, Samuel whispering into his ear, I don't bargain. Like, golly, like, Samuel, what a guy he is, like, just crazy. You get my point. Like, he was such a good character, and, when he got his movie. Also, because she's part of the main cast, and yet she's not in this film that much. Dr. Ann Estman, I think I got that right, played by Julianne Moore, because at one point, Dr. Richard is in another, like, hospital building, and he helps out this kid who's not doing too well, and Richard helps out the kid, and I think, like, Richard, he was, like, disguised, like, pretending to be a janitor, I want to say, and Dr. Ann, like, notices that Richard helped out the kid, and she realizes that he's a fake and was going to call in security. And even the U.S. Marshals, they come in, and Samuel, once again chasing Richard, and of course, Richard successfully escapes. Gosh, even when, like, he said to, like, the security guards that, telling them that there's a crazy man with a gun in the air, like, and, he was talking about Samuel, that was bait, like, basically for him to escape. And golly, because when, like, closing, the doors, from keeping Richard to escaping, and Samuel just, like, pointing, like, shooting at the doors, and golly, like, he is determined to take down Richard. And Richard, at one point, like, there's this, I want to say, like, St. Patrick's Day parade. Yeah, that's what it is. And Richard, like, going in there in the crowd, they're marching and blending in, of course. And, of course, he tricks the U.S. Marshals, including Samuel, of course, the leader of the U.S. Marshals. And, and also, again, as I read the story/description, throughout this film, Richard is determined to clear his name and prove his innocence and to find out who the killer is. Because, we saw a little glimpse of the killer, and we know that as Richard explained, he had a mechanical arm. And we of course see the mechanical arm. And it's believed to be this one guy who has a mechanical arm named Sykes, played by Andreas Costellas. Yeah, I recognize him. Yeah, he's been in a lot. You know, he's one of those actors that's been in a lot. So it's believed that he's the one that killed his wife, even when, say, Richard, like, he sometimes gets help from some of his friends who, obviously, they know he's innocent. And, you know, from, say, one other doctor named Dr. Charles Nichols, played by Jerome Crabe. I think I got that right. There was also, like, a female doctor and another black guy who they know Dr. Richard Kimball so well that surely they know he's innocent. And, you know, even especially Dr. Charles Nichols, who we saw from the beginning and, you know, before the murder happened of his wife, you know, like a good friend of the Kimballs. And, you know, he helps out Richard a couple times. Like, you know, he gave Richard some money. Richard called in Kimball, like, not Kimball, Dr. Charles for help. And even at one point, Richard called Samuel himself, you know, reminding him what he said, you know, inside the dam, you know, that he said he doesn't care. And yeah, and as he says, you know, he doesn't care. But he leaves Samuel and the U.S. Marshal clues, like, you know, he sets the phone down and, you know, they can track down his location where the call is taking place. And when they get there, they find, you know, the clues and evidence, and, you know, they even at one point question Sykes. And even say Sykes, he goes in later on to gun down Dr. Richard Cramble. And then you start to realize, like Richard starts to realize this from one of his other friends, that, you know what, like, he now knows who it was that was responsible for his wife's murder. Like, if I remember correctly, like, you know, Sykes was hired to kill Helen. And the person who hired Sykes, well, I think, aside from Richard, for the audience, they start to realize, wait, is it him? And yeah, because, you know, with Sykes, you know, hunting down and gunning down Richard, even on a subway. And at one point, you know, Richard, he defeats Sykes and, like, has him handcuffed. He then goes to, like, I think, like, a conference meeting where Dr. Charles Nichols is making a speech, and the U.S. Marshals, once again, on Richard's tail. And when they get there, Dr. Richard confronts Dr. Charles Nichols because, you know, he believes that it's Charles who's responsible for his wife's murder. And even when they go to a private room to talk, well, sure enough, Dr. Charles throws, like, a chair on him, you know, hits him with a chair, and yeah, it was Dr. Charles Nichols who was responsible for his wife's death. It's him. And, a fight sequence, like they're on the roof and a helicopter coming in trying to shoot down Richard, and Samuel being there too, and he's telling them to call off the helicopter, you know, because he says, I don't want to get shot. Obviously not. And then when it comes to, like, say, one part of the building where, you know, Dr. Charles is hiding and, you know, lurking. Same goes for Richard, Samuel, and another U.S. Marshal member. And Samuel, like, talking to Richard, you know, stand down, like, you have nowhere to run. And, you know, even at one point, Dr. Charles, like, takes out one of the U.S. Deputies, you know, like, hitting, like those, like, construction pieces, like, hitting him right in the head, like, on the face, like, golly, that take him down instantly. Although he's all right at the end. It didn't kill him. It just knocked him out unconscious, literally. And Dr. Charles, he was going to, you know, kill Samuel, but of course, Richard taking down Charles, and of course, you know, that's it. And, you know, Samuel, he, of course, now knows that it wasn't Richard, and Richard, at this point, is innocent, and, everything's good for Richard. And so it was Dr. Charles that, as I said, was the one that was responsible for Richard's wife's murder. He's arrested for good, and the same goes for Sykes. And, even at one point, like, Richard is handcuffed, but of course, he's finally free, Like, why did they put the cuffs on him when he was proved innocent? I think it's one of those things, And, Richard said to Samuel, you said you didn't care. And Samuel's like, I know, I don't care. But in a way, he does care, in his way. He's not going to really show that he cares, but you get my point. So, yeah, and that's how the movie ends, They're in the police car, they drive off, and even say, like, before the credits finish, like, we get some shots of Chicago, yeah, the fireworks go off, and, yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. The Fugitive. What a great film this is, based off of a TV show. One of those rare movies based off of a TV show that's so good. It's so good. And by the way, James Newton Howard doing the music and score. Like, James Newton Howard is one of those top composers that just makes music fantastic. And I'm giving this film 10 out of 10 stars. That's right. 10 out of 10 stars for The Fugitive. And what about you guys? What did you think of The Fugitive itself? And what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. So, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of The Fugitive. More review videos coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. And of course, the week reviewing films starring Harrison Ford is still continuing, and stay tuned later this week because the next film I'm going to be reviewing, this time alongside with my dad, aka Little Blue, we're going to be reviewing a film that's science fiction, and like The Fugitive, it too is celebrating its anniversary. You'll just have to wait and see. Like, maybe some of you know what it is, but for those of you that don't, just stay tuned. Take care, and happy anniversary to The Fugitive. Peace out.